Jujutsu Kaisen and One Piece are the two biggest anime out right now, by far. Let's figure out which is better, the new gen King Jujutsu Kaisen or the last of the old guard in One Piece. Now, I have made hundreds of videos on the anime and manga of One Piece, by the way, and I am a massive Jujutsu Kaisen anime only. So due to my credentials, I think everything I say is objectively correct. So here's going to be the criteria. Number 1 is going to be story, number 2 is going to be characters, number 3 is going to be fights, number 4 is going to be animation, and number 5 is going to be the world. Of course, there's going to be a number 6 at the end with fun random stuff that isn't as significant. And just so you know, this is for everything in 2023, so all of Jujutsu Kaisen season 2 and One Piece starting off a couple episodes after Yamato vs Kaido, so Gear 5 and everything is going to be in there. And don't forget, every bit of criteria can be weighed differently depending on what you like. If you're a 7 Deadly Sins fan, you might think fights are the most important thing in the world, or if you're a fan of Demon Slayer, all you may care about is animation. So don't get too wound up by the numbers. The story. The narrative of both of these are relatively simple in concept, and they're both done in this way to set up even grander moments and of course fights. JJK is interesting. At first glance, it may seem like it's going to be in any other anime, seeming eerily similar to Naruto, with the main twist being that Itadori can throw hands right out the gate, and One Piece on the other hand starts off with Luffy going island to island, creating deep narrative moments with a bunch of these characters. But of course, this is comparing their stories in 2023, and although it's not over yet with JJK, I think we have enough information to come to a good conclusion. One Piece is of course in its third act, and we've reached the conclusion of the arc for the most part, with a lot of questions we wanted answered, whereas Jujutsu Kaisen is introducing a whole new set of questions. First of all, Jujutsu Kaisen starts off with young Gojo and Geto roaming, trying to defend Rico, and to be honest, they both seem a little unhinged, and you can immediately see that Gojo starts off way more deluded than Geto. One Piece is of course tying together a lot of narrative beats, and there's a lot of fights at this part that do have a massive part to play in story. There's a lot of really huge moments for One Piece, in particular with Sanji struggling with his past and the raid suit that he ultimately destroys to prevent himself losing his mind. Gojo, who's supposed to be a god and untouchable, gets outmatched and outplayed by Toji, resulting in the death of Rico. Momo has moments where he needs to be strong, and for so long he has been helpless to defend his people from the monster that has been tormenting their lands for years. Gojo plants a seed that leads to Geto's downfall as society is celebrating the death of a girl, and Geto realizes that no matter what he does, he's stuck in an endless loop of suffering. Kaido has to deal with the fact that he's a failed prodigy and never reaches his true potential and has to live through suffering. Gojo, the most powerful being in the world, gets shocked in Shibuya at this sound and look at his old friend's face. And even though these are massive character moments, both of these anime use their characters to be a massive part of the story. There's so many huge story moments for both of the stories that wrapped up huge parts of the narrative and tied everything together. There's moments throughout the entire year for both of these series that have left me absolutely speechless, as elements and themes from past seasons continue to ring true, and to see Luffy become the embodiment of freedom and liberate the people of Wano to finally be free after all these years, and seeing the sorcerers throw themselves into the fire and seeing Gojo struggle with the decision of who to save is what continues to make these stories have stakes and be compelling. And JJK does have moments where the narrative may feel a little disoriented, with so many characters to focus on that don't play into all the same plot points that other characters do, and part of that may be due to the fact that the season isn't over yet. But One Piece is not at all perfect either. There's still a lot of unanswered questions, and even though it is the conclusion of Wano, Zoro's backstory and Ryuma are two huge moments for the character that never really got expanded on. Kaido's backstory was massively underwhelming. A lot of the samurai felt like they're injected with the most insane plot armor possible, and at moments slowed down the story so much. Like, Jesus Christ, I did not care for them by Wano Part 3. Both of them have had moments that hit hard and moments that left us confused, but overall, I would give One Piece an 8.5 for stories. Even though not everything was fitting, the conclusion does still fit the themes of the story, with the people of Wano attempting a helpless rebellion and Luffy breaking their chains and liberating them while spreading freedom, as well as so many hype moments from Shanks appearing to Zoro vs King to Gear 5, pivoting the whole story. It was messy, but it was still great. The overall for Jujutsu Kaisen for me is a 9 out of 10. The story told in the first 6 episodes is nothing short of masterful, from Geto's descent feeling perfect and seeing Gojo struggle, and the thematic yet earnest differences between the two as they question right or wrong and if they're even having an impact in the world, as well as seeing the truth of the high societies, as well as seeing how moved some of the characters were for Geto and seeing how they set up Gojo to be trapped and removed from the story. It all felt organic, and I'm really excited to see how the story is going to wrap up. Moving on to characters. The character in both of these anime are what makes it great, mainly because of what was alluded to earlier in terms of the simple structure of One Piece and JJK using characters to make you feel like you're in the story, and all of the Straw Hats are guiding your experience and making you feel like you're a part of the crew, even though some people take this way too far. Like, you're not in the crew like like that, boss. Jujutsu Kaisen, on the other hand, decides, yeah, we're gonna blow your mind with these characters time and time and time again until you're just like, yeah, he's cold, and then you're like, no, but he's the real goat, and then you're like, oh damn, I did not know you had game like that. I am sorry. Without reiterating all the points I said for story, it's clear that all the characters in JJK are deep. One Piece characters all have really in-depth qualities and motivations that are refined to a T. And one of the big points either for or against One Piece's characters is Gear 5. On one hand, it has transformed Luffy to the absolute embodiment of freedom that can literally do whatever he wants, however he wants, and become a literal Looney Tunes devil. On the other hand, it does feel like a kick in the face because he's basically the chosen one, and he no longer has the shitty devil fruit anymore that he has to overcome to defeat all of his villains. Does this affect his past feats and change the structure of his character? I would flip on it, and I think a lot of people flip on that too. And I understand both sides of the aisle, but Jujutsu Kaisen has even bigger issues. Like, who is the main character? Nah, like, this is half a joke, but it's in part of what makes the story great. But particularly in 2023, there have been so many characters shining for both of these series that continue to adapt to their personalities to a bunch of characters that you honestly didn't think of much before. Seeing someone like Toji off himself when he realized he was fighting Megami was just completely out of nowhere. Seeing that King has been loyal to Kaido way longer than we thought for a way deeper reason than you may have realized, and seeing Nanami ready to absolutely beat the fucking shit out of whoever hurts his comrades makes you remember that this stoic character is a man of honor. Seeing every character in One Piece work towards this endless struggle, but they all never lost faith in Luffy. They really thought Luffy had the hands to beat Kaido, and they were willing to stand on it no matter what. In the face of peril, they remembered that all you have is hope. There are moments where Jujutsu Kaisen characters are also facing pressure like no other and do everything possible to try and survive. Overall, I would say One Piece characters are a 9.5 out of 10 because they are and will always be why we watch One Piece, and so far this year it's been no different. Seeing Luffy still be Luffy while fighting a monster will always move you. Seeing Sanji still facing traumas of Whole Cake and trying to fight past it makes you remember its weight of the world on his shoulders. Seeing Nami never believe for a second that Luffy is actually dead. These characters are what make the story great, and you feel like you're watching your friends and family go to battle when you're watching One Piece, and you almost know how they're going to react to things before they actually do it. Jujutsu Kaisen, on the other hand, has an overall for me of 8.5. Although the cool factor for these characters is through the roof. To be honest, it's hard to say that a lot of them aren't underdeveloped. Some added scenes for Mekamaru could have made his fight even sadder. Seeing more of Nanami working with his comrades would have been even more difficult to see him that angry. And Nobara to this point still feels like a lacking character. Not as bad as Sakura, don't get me wrong, not as bad as Sakura. And yes, this may change throughout season 2, which it likely will, but I feel like a lot of moments so far needed a little bit more development before they happen. That was always going to be one of the hardest criteria, but as for number 3, it's a little more clear. For me, sort of. Fights in anime play two parts in contributing to the experience. The first part is they contribute to the story and round out characters, and these moments get them to push past and reach new limits in some cases where most of the narrative will take place. And the second part, of course, is to just make you go like, ooh, wow, ooh, what the fuck is going on here? Now, both One Piece and JJK do both of these things very well. Ironically enough, though, this has by far been one of the best year of One Piece fights between Zoro vs King, Sanji vs Queen, Luffy vs Kaido, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There have been so many hype moments, and episode 1071 featuring this unreal Looney Tunes style with fluid animation that really is unlike anything we've ever seen before. And although animation is its own category, one of my favorite moments was when Luffy restarted Gear 5. Like, he looked like a whole human being. JJK, on the other hand, just absolutely blows your mind with mixing both elements, and this animation style is completely different. Gojo throws hands with Toji unlike anything you've seen, and then all of a sudden he has a knife in his neck, and then all of a sudden Rico gets shot, and then Geto and Toji throw hands, and then you're like, oh nah, Gojo's back, and then Toji comes like dead. Years later now, Gojo is moving supersonic speeds trying to save everyone. He gets sealed, and we get one of the most fascinating fights in my eyes with Megumi and Itadori with the invert sky, and I thought that was one of the most creative and unique fight abilities we've seen this year. And although there's been much crazier moments with much crazier characters, it was one of the most underrated fights of the year due to the creative solutions at play. Jujutsu Kaisen has really revived the true meaning of a team fight. Seeing them fight Mr. Krabs was one of the coolest moments of the year. They were getting destroyed, and then Toji pops out, sharpens the nunchuck, and just goes crazy, reminding us by far why he's the coolest character of the year with the Black Air Force energy of the anime world that we all needed. Not to mention Itadori's fight, which I will go really in depth in for the animation section. At the point of recording, Sukuna vs Shogo was the last fight, and Jesus Christ, talk about major character introductions like that. One of the best fights of the year, if not the best fight. To be honest, in terms of fights, these two really are at competition only with each other. Between this new frame by frame GOAT of One Piece, creating a fascinating style while supporting the narrative, versus JJK that will just shock your mind time and time again. So far, it would be disingenuous to say that One Piece has not had 10 out of 10 fights this year. Every new episode of Gear 5 Luffy vs Kaido felt like a new high and took anime fights to places they've never been before. The frame-by-frame animation of One Piece fights also can't just be a throwaway line, although that plays more into animation. The fact that it plays into fights needs to be taken into account. Some of the story moments will always hit hard for One Piece fights just because it's impossible to ignore the depth of character over the years. But for Jujutsu Kaisen, unfortunately, I have to give it a 10 out of 10 as well. And I know everyone hates a tie, but how could you not? Like, seriously, how could you say one is better than the other? They both round out and use fights to elevate the story as well as entertain us like we've never been before. JJK seems like they just can't miss right now and have used fights to demonstrate scale like no other. Not to mention the fact JJK has really clean power scaling, at least for now, that all of the fights respect and continue to elevate and add depth to. And I know ties suck, but come on now, can you really disagree? Number 4 is animation. I know this can be a bit messy considering the last one was fights, but I'll try and be distinct and not only just harp on fights being the main part of animation. There will also be a lot of scaling for One Piece because it's weekly, but hey, I should scale for Mappa too because them boys were working on unreal conditions. But One Piece has always used animation in an interesting manner, and we're going to particularly move into moments of big episodes that aren't fights. For example, in 1071 when they're not fighting, we see this really sick art style that has a greater focus on detail and lighting that usually isn't present in the typical week by week episode, whereas JJK has some of my favorite lighting moments as well in all of anime, which I'll get more into later. But it needs to be noted that the setting for One Piece is so different from JJK. Literally being in Tokyo and real Japan, whereas One Piece is in old school Japan, makes this a really cool argument. My favorite non-fight scene in One Piece this year was when they let the lanterns float in the air during the festival of the episode Kaido was defeated, and it really did just make you feel like you're in old school Japan. And there's also the fact that all of Onigashima was on fire, which created some unique scenes, not to mention how the Looney Tunes scenes made some of the characters' eyes pop out. But that last point can also be viewed as a negative because it was really unlike anything we've seen to that point in the story. You can really view that as a jarring, out of character moment for the series. And JJK has also had these funny gag moments that some people complained about during season 1, but there wasn't that many of those in this season, and I really like them, so I'm a bit biased in that department. Now to just talk about fights, One Piece has created this mind-blowing frame-by-frame fluid style, which we talked about in depth in the last point, but really did feel like the peak of what an anime episode could be. The peak of stylistic choice and creating a unique experience that plays into the story that also looks insane, and the peak of what anime could hit this year. But Jujutsu Kaisen has created moments that can only be described as a cinematic experience that will just shatter your mind. I will always be blown away by Itadori vs Choso, and it's honestly been my favorite anime fight of the year. The way the scene was lighted with the glowing neon lights of the subway, to the water flowing in the bathroom, to the first person scenes showing the lack of control of his own power. Mappa has elevated the experience and making these moments that will just leave you speechless. Of course, there was that bad moment with Maki and Megumi, but is that really that big of a deal? And I know a lot of manga fans have been disappointed about some of the animation of the iconic panels, but as an anime only, I don't really care. I was totally satisfied with everything, and Gojo looked crazy enough to me. Jujutsu Kaisen has also used colors like no other, as it typically has this gray, dark blue, red color palette, but when they break that form, they bring out these vibrant colors that help contribute to the vibe and tone of the scenes. We see these with the sharp blues on the beach and the glowing yellow sky during Gojo vs Toji. And all of these tell the audience that something different is going on. One Piece does use Looney Tunes style to help depict just how free Luffy is and the fact that he can do anything, but it is massively different from the rest of the series, and it seems to be something you either love or hate. For me, it felt a bit strange, and maybe no single scene in it was really that disturbing, but JJK may never have reached some of the peaks that One Piece did in terms of Luffy restarting Gear 5 and Zoro vs King was overall the peak of anime this year. But on an episode to episode basis, I have to give it to JJK at a 9.5 and One Piece with a 9, just because there was just no complaints from me with JJK, and some moments in One Piece were just a little bit weird. Hey, a 9 out of 10 isn't bad though. The fifth and final main criteria is going to be the world, and this is probably the most clear out of anything, and I will be referencing some non-2023 stuff for One Piece and JJK because it'd be pretty dumb not to. The world of JJK is dark and has a lot of depth as it takes place in a real modern Japan with a plethora of different elements, from cults to corrupt elders to sorcerers to curses to evil sorcerers. This world has a lot of elements to it that are really cool and offer a lot of variety on the canvas that is modern Tokyo. One Piece, on the other hand, is one of the most vast and ever-expanding worlds that is overwhelmingly big, going island to island with each island having the same amount of depth as whole anime. That is not an overstatement by any means. What really surprised me is the fact that almost every island draws inspiration from a real location of mythology. That is really cool. Elbaf and Vikings, Dressrosa in Spain, Wano in Japan, these elements add to the story. Part of world and setting is tone, and Jujutsu Kaisen brings out this dark tone that really makes you feel like anyone can die. We're put into situations in abandoned schools, juvenile detention centers, things of that nature that really help complement the story and overall experience. One Piece, on the other hand, uses world to make you feel immersed with the characters and what they're experiencing, as they're discovering things at the same time you are. These moments do help elevate One Piece and feeling like a magical experience of mystery with systems of depth. Jujutsu Kaisen has deep network of cults, clans, and elders. They all have their own goals and objectives between the Zenin clan, the Jujutsu school elders, and Gojo. He has a whole bunch of his own goals. It really makes you feel that everyone is working for something even if you don't know what it is yet. The kingdoms in One Piece also have a deep history, and pretty much everything is connected to the past lore in one way or another. From the poneglyphs to the world government history, and seeing this in Wano has been great. Why Wano was cut off from the rest of the world, how Kaido imprisoned them, why no one has been to Wano, it all makes sense and connects to something previously seen. Sometimes the goals of characters in JJK feel a little ambiguous, and they get a little explanation as to why they do what they do, and the most part we go with it because we understand that with seasonal anime it can be hard to shed light on everything going on in your story. And when most of season 2 were limited to Shibuya, and what Jujutsu Kaisen does in expanding their world is they actually do it through their characters showing off a deep assassination network, or Geto having crazy loyalists. It's pretty interesting and a good way to make a single setting expansive, as well as the fact that domain expansion offers, I mean, how much variety does that offer? For the most part, I would say in terms of world, Jujutsu Kaisen is about an 8 out of 10, as everything does have an explanation, but it's also presented in a really intriguing way, and it works within the story. One Piece, on the other hand, if you're including the whole story, obviously 10 out of 10, but Wano, I would say, is about an 8.5 out of 10, as there's a lot of depth there, but I still wanted more explanations on, say, old Wano. But what we got was interesting, as well as between the past 20 years in between their time jump, the past shoguns and different leaders of Wano, it really was a dope setting that Oda put a lot of time into. Now for the fun stuff. These are a bit of rapid fire, just little fun things that aren't the most significant. Soundtrack, I think you gotta go with One Piece, the very strongest. I mean, come on now. Power systems, honestly, Curse Energy is better than Haki in my opinion. I mean, domain expansion is just sick. Character designs, you're crazy if you don't go with One Piece. These boys come out looking tripped out to the max. Aesthetic, I'm going JJK. The dark tone is sick. Humor, hot take, I'm going with JJK on this one. I like their jokes, even if other people don't. Lore, I gotta go with One Piece, although I am intrigued by the Sukuna era a lot. All in all, though, my conclusion on what has been the better anime of 2023. Is it One Piece, or is it JJK? And I gotta go with Jujutsu Kaisen for me so far, which is absolutely crazy for me to say, because I can't say enough how excited I am week to week to watch Jujutsu Kaisen compared to that of One Piece. I feel like there's no doubt that JJK episodes are fire, whereas some of the hype moments of One Piece this year have been moments that just didn't land for me. Now, I need to say and remind everyone, I am a manga reader, so naturally I wasn't as shocked and surprised as everyone else for Gear 5. That isn't to say that One Piece hasn't been great, but there were moments for me that were supposed to be hype, and I honestly felt like they fell flat. Even though there is a scoring system, I ultimately feel that Jujutsu Kaisen has encapsulated everything for me that I want in the story, and has left me repeatedly speechless time and time again. And Jujutsu Kaisen has just moved me in a way that I haven't had an anime move me in a while. It feels like I picked up a new anime that I know is going to be one of my all-time favorites forever. The way that the scenes are animated, and it's this cinematic experience that whenever I'm watching, it feels like time is moving in 10x speed, and I'm blinking, the episode is done. And that's not to say that One Piece doesn't have moments like that too, but there's a lot of moments in One Piece that I've just been so accustomed to, and maybe it's because I wanted to shift from the norm, maybe it's because I finally wanted something different, but Jujutsu Kaisen is just one of the best and compelling anime to come out in a long time, and to see the quality, the episode to episode quality is insane, and it really feels like they've been on like a 18 episode run of no misses. I don't know how many episodes it's been, but I know that every time I turn it on, I'm getting something that will just leave me shocked. So I don't know how much my bias for One Piece, knowing the manga, is playing into it compared to being an anime only for JJK, just being shocked every time I turn it on. But I can definitely say, maybe objectively you want to go with One Piece for story reasons, get into the weeds, but at some point you have to break it down and say, what do you enjoy more, what do you like more? But Jujutsu Kaisen has just been on another level entirely from every other anime coming out this year. And maybe you disagree with that, maybe you don't, but it'd be hard to say that it hasn't been the best anime of this year. And I don't know if social media attention will support that, it likely won't, won't because of how hype Gear 5 was, but the story and world of Jujutsu Kaisen being that dark and that interesting, and the anime being that cinematic, is something that I never thought we would ever get. And even though One Piece has had huge moments this year, completely flipping the story on its head and flipping the narrative on its head, and even though One Piece had Zoro vs King in the beginning of the year, Sanji vs Queen, there was a lot of episodes that I feel like I just tuned out and didn't really care that much for. And when there were moments in between fights, I just didn't care for that as much, and I'm not as intrigued by the lore. And the Kaido flashback falling flat is huge because this huge care factor and this huge want factor for supporting the villain that you honestly get with One Piece a lot wasn't there for me that much. Compared to seeing Geto being controlled, it's been completely different, and seeing Gojo, this god being, struggle hits way harder than seeing Kaido have seemingly no motivation. Big Mom seemingly still doesn't have anything too crazy going on. There was just so many moments that I wanted from One Piece in terms of the Zoro backstory and a lot more of old Wano and a lot more lore reveals that I feel like they held out on. And even though the fights have been epic for One Piece, there's a lot more to it than just fights. And like I said, reading the manga for One Piece may affect my mind about this in ways that I don't expect, in ways that I don't even fully understand. But for me right now, I honestly think Jujutsu Kaisen is the king of anime in 2023. And if you agree or disagree, let me know down below. And if you enjoyed this video, check out this one on Attack on Titan versus One Piece. Let's see who wins that. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, and don't forget, we're just getting started. We're going to stay consistent, and I will see you in the next video.